The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom released about 2 months ago, and personally, I was excited for it. For the first time ever in the franchise, we were going to have a playable Zelda in a game fans of the franchise were going to acknowledge the existence of in 20 plus years. I couldn't wait to sit down and play it, but was I right to be excited for it? Will Echoes of Wisdom be talked about in 20 plus years? And most importantly, is Echoes of Wisdom worth $80? Once again, before we get started, I want to ask that you leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of content. Without further ado, let's talk about gameplay. Well, and the good news is Echoes of Wisdom is different in this regard because you're playing as Zelda. And because you're playing as Zelda, you don't fight enemies in the way that you normally would, unless you want to, more on that in a bit, but instead you use echoes of enemies you've previously fought to defeat new enemies. I found the system to be quite fun since you can actually answer your questions about whether a Moblin could defeat a Lizalfos while you're watching and resummoning as needed. But I really didn't like having to use the scroll menu to get to echoes on a regular basis. I really wish they'd allowed me to favorite a few echoes I regularly use and call it done. Like, you can sort by recent, which sort of does the trick, but I found the system as a whole to be unintuitive and frustrating at times because I simply couldn't find what I was looking for and kept having to scroll over and over again. I just can't help but think being able to favorite echoes would have been a good feature, and is something I'd like to see in a future port of Echoes of Wisdom. Again, it comes close by allowing you to organize your echoes by most used, but I also don't want to regularly change organizational methods to find echoes I want to use. That having been said, echoes are a core gameplay mechanic, and one that, user interface aside, I'm quite happy with. You can create an echo of every non-boss enemy in the game and use them to your advantage. Personally, I found the level 2 Sword Moblins, Dark Nuts, the Wizrobes, and the Keys to be the best echoes for combat, and as the game progresses, the best overall price to performance on echoes as well. Depending on your needs though, you may wish to go for sheer numbers, in which case any echo that costs 1 tri-power will do the job. Just make sure to resummon as needed. You can also use echoes to get around Hyrule and its various caves and dungeons, which I thought was super cool and worked really well with the world design. Personally, I got the most mileage out of the old bed, water, flying tile, and plat boom, as with those I can ascend diagonally, vertically, or just fly across hazard. Outside of the echoes I've already mentioned, I didn't have a lot of use for the other ones outside of just collecting them for the sake of collecting them. Like, sure, there's a couple of quests that involve needing to summon specific echoes, but again, you're mostly collecting the echoes for completionist reasons rather than because they will actually assist you in gameplay. Either that, or I just found the most efficient setup of echoes and went with it. Well, I'll leave that to your interpretations. If you decide you need to personally dispatch an enemy, you can activate Sword Fighter form, which lets you play the game as if you were Link for as long as your meter lasts. I mostly use it as a way to quickly kill enemies guarding chests or in boss battles. As the game progresses, you gain more abilities to use in this form, namely the use of bombs and a bow. Throughout the world, there are might crystals that you can use to upgrade your abilities in Sword Fighter form. You can get these from clearing rifts, or from chests, or just scattered around the world. Personally, I tended to prioritize upgrading the meter itself rather than the abilities, although I think you're best served by alternating between upgrading the meter and the sword until they're maxed out, and then doing the same for the bow and the bombs. Again, I never once used the bombs in Sword Fighter mode, mainly because I already had echoes that could explode, so I never really saw the point. But it's nice to have them just in case. What did end up falling flat for me was automations. I got them pretty late in the game, and I guess I'd probably done everything interesting with them, so in the comments, tell me something that you can do with automations, because I actually have no idea. Seriously, I don't want to mark for or against them because I just did not get the experience I needed to do that. Now, let's talk about what there is to do, and there's a lot. Echoes of Wisdom does a great job of allowing you to explore the world, which you really love to see in a Zelda game. The world feels large enough that you can explore it, while being small enough that exploring it's not a chore. which isn't something a lot of games today get right. It's not as big as, say, Tears of the Kingdom, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be. I never felt like I'd run out of things to do while I was playing the game, and there was a more or less constant stream of main and side quests, caves, and collectibles to get. You really get a good feeling of progression as the game goes on, especially with unlocking fast travel points and additional echoes, which is good and is actually something I feel Tears of the Kingdom lacked to an extent. I also really liked that you can use echoes to get over and around obstacles and walls in the world. It makes the world feel more, for lack of a better term, bendable, and gives a good sense of progression. I remember actually having to go around walls and cliffs to get various locations in the game, but as I got the water and old bad echoes, I just climbed up whatever was over my path, or fast traveled depending. The echoes mechanic adds a lot to the game, and you can tell the developers thought about where it might be useful, and just kind of let players have the freedom to play with it. Next up, let's talk about Tri. And everyone, preemptively, put your pitchforks away. This is probably the hottest take of this review. Got your pitchforks put away and you're sitting down? Good. I don't like Tri. I like having them as a companion, as a storage for my echoes, so with Tri power, but I also found the advice that Tri gives to be kind of obvious. And when I do need help on side quests or something like that, there's nowhere to be found. To an extent, this is on the developers, because I wish there was a way to ask Tri for help on, or advice on side quests. And we have a slot on the D-pad that goes unused, so maybe at some point in development it was planned, but anytime she interjected at the end of a dialogue, I was just kind of like, yeah, I figured that out already. See, at least, if I think back to probably one of the worst examples of extensive hand-holding in Fi, for all Fi's sins, she was at least ready to go for anything you needed, and Tri couldn't even do that. At the end of the game when they left, my reaction was more along the lines of, finally, inner peace, than the sadness the developers were going for. The other part of it I think that really hurts Tri is the lack of Tri power that that I think was Grezzo gave them. Even at max level, you're dealing with 6 Tri power, which I don't think is enough. I think it felt tight for me in places, and I think had they given us 7 or 8 instead of knocking off a Tri power cost for mobs that you never, or echoes that you never actually use on a regular basis, I think that would have been far better. So I think in a future remaster, I'd like to see it go up to a maximum of 7 or 8 Tri power and get rid of some of the cost cutting levels. So now it's time to talk about what makes a Zelda game a Zelda game. Story, dungeons, and exploration. And I'm pleased to report that Echoes of Wisdom doesn't disappoint in this regard, mostly. The dungeons are actually traditional Zelda dungeons, but I found the puzzles to be a bit easier than I'd like. Usually when I play a Zelda game, I end up with 2 to 3 puzzles over the course of the game that I have to look up, even when I'm replaying them. In Echoes of Wisdom, I only had 1. The puzzle where you have to get the 2 armors to press down the 2 pressure plates at the exact same time. I had no idea what to do with that. The game gives you exactly 0 hints, and you're just... I had no idea what to do with it. I think I tried to figure it out in the... what was it called? Lightning Temple? The Forest Temple? For a solid 45 minutes. Could not do it, and I had to eventually look it up, which is not ideal. I also thought the bosses were done well, requiring you to use the echoes you've gotten in the dungeon or earlier quests to defeat them, or you can use Sword Fighter mode depending. I did a bit of both. While I never had trouble with the bosses, they posed a sufficient challenge if you hadn't prepared properly. Next, let's talk story, and I have to say I'm conflicted. The story is good, don't get me wrong, and I think you could make an argument for great, but as a Zelda fan, there is a choice that I'm not happy with, and that's ignoring the Triforce name. The Triforce does show up in Echoes of Wisdom, which is a welcome return, but instead they refer to it as Prime Energy. I think you could have kept everything the same, except using the word Triforce, and the story in the game would be just as good, if not better, and to me, not using the word feels like Nintendo is trying to get people to forget what the Prime Energy was called before. It is my only mark against the story in Echoes of Wisdom, and I love what Grezzo and Nintendo was able to do with a playable Zelda, but it just stands out to me, and I don't like it. And finally, let's talk bugs. And I'm pleased to report that Echoes of Wisdom is, at least in my playthrough, bug-free. It's clear Grezzo took care to fix any bugs they encountered in development, and I'm impressed that the developer by what they were able to do. It's not often these days that a game comes out in as good a state as Echoes of Wisdom has. Performance aside, more on that later. So it's something to be celebrated for sure. I am now ready to give a score on gameplay. Overall, Echoes of Wisdom is a return to form in the 2D Zelda genre. I love that they took Zelda and were able to give her abilities that made sense for her character. The story, while finding a way to incorporate the traditional gameplay Zelda is known for. The story, side quests, and collectibles also work in the game and provide a meaningful sense of progression. Minor gripes aside. However, I actually did hit a wall with Echoes of Wisdom about 20 hours. I don't know why, and ultimately I did finish the game and it was fun, but it was missing something, and I can't put my finger on what was missing, but it was missing something. Gameplay-wise, I think it's between a 3 and a 4 for me on the rubric, but the bugs go into the 5 column, for sure. So I think overall, I'm going to award it a score of 4 out of 5, with the understanding that I think depending on what you value more between gameplay and bug-free, an argument could be made for either 3.5 or 4.5. With that complete, let's move on to graphics and performance. Now, graphically speaking, Echoes of Wisdom is very similar to Link's Awakening remake that came out a few years ago, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. Personally, I love the art style and I think the graphics look good, even if dynamically the game does sometimes drop to 720p in docked mode, but for the most part it's above that, which is fine. Unfortunately, performance is well, you can probably see it sometimes in the footage that I recorded. It really tries, no pun intended, to maintain 30 FPS, but sometimes the Switch just can't do it. And this is especially noticeable if you learn an Echo or sometimes just wander about the world. I'd say it manages 30 FPS about 90% of the time, but when it doesn't, it's noticeable enough that I can call out when it does it. In theory, it's possible this could be fixed by overclocking your Switch, something I don't recommend doing, but I couldn't get the relevant software to work for me. But I was able to improve performance another way. Again, this is another instance. I need you to put your pitchforks away. Put your pitchforks away, blow out your torches, hear me out. By dumping the game and using an emulator to play it, again, pitchforks away. I did it for the review. You can improve performance. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that you should do this. But if you want to, the performance improvements are noticeable, with the price being some texture issues in the game. I played it on Ryujinx on Steam Deck for a bit, and found the performance to be improved once shader compilation was complete. Do you need to do it? No. But if you really value performance, there are ways to get more, and depending on the setup you've got on your PC or Mac or what have you, improve resolution. So with that in mind, I'm now ready to give a score on graphics and performance. Overall, the game looks good, but the performance on Switch has issues. Well, I suspect the performance issues are because the Switch just can't handle the engine, and the issue can be fixed via emulation and or overclocking your Switch. I don't think either of those two solutions should play a role in the score. The former, the overclock emulation, is more complex. But I also don't think the performance issues are for lack of optimization on Grezzo's part, but are instead an artifact of the engine itself being a little bit heavy. I therefore award Echoes of Wisdom a score of 3.5. While the game looks good, there are noticeable frame drops, and the game's performance is about what you'd expect given the engine. Hopefully, once Switch 2 comes out, the game can achieve a locked 30 FPS at least, or preferably a locked 60 FPS. Lastly, let's talk price. Okay, price is kind of what you'd expect for a first-party Nintendo IP. 80 Canadian dollars, or 60 if you're in the US. And for that price, I find it difficult to recommend. It's so close. It really is. I think if it was $70 Canadian, I could do it, but 80 is a stretch. I actually did pay $70 for it because I had a $10 Walmart gift card I wanted to use up, and I think it was more than worth it. But 80 would have been a tougher sell, but I'm enough of a Zelda fan, I still would have gotten it. So to be clear, it's not because of the lack of content. I think it comes back to that wall that I hit and the performance issues. Without those issues, I think this is an easy 4. But with those issues, I think Echoes of Wisdom is either a very high 3.5 or a very low 4. I think you can make an argument for either. I don't think either is wrong. I am now ready to give a score for price. I think given the amount of content, the overall quality of that content, I'm going to award it a score of 4 out of 5. It is worth full price, but not a penny more. And if you have a spare voucher lying around, Echoes of Wisdom is a great use for it. Or a gift card with a small amount of money or something like that. It's worth it. It's also a good Christmas or birthday present for what will likely be the Switch's last full year as the latest console offering from Nintendo. So in conclusion, Echoes of Wisdom scores a 15.5 out of 20. This is by no means a bad score, but there are issues with the game that prevent it from being scored higher. Some of these can be fixed with more powerful hardware, but some are structural, and as such, I can't see my score going beyond 17 or 18 out of 20 in the event that this game gets either performance improvements or it runs better on Switch 2. So in conclusion, Echoes of Wisdom is worth $80. But if you see it for less, be assured that it is a good deal and more than worth your time. I'm also going to recommend, if emulating it on either Yuzu or Ryujinx, if you can find either of those, if you want or overclocking your Switch if you can, to get as much performance out of it as possible. Alternatively, you could wait probably 6 months or so until Switch 2 is out and see if that helps with it, because backwards compatibility is confirmed. Thanks for watching this review. If I did it right, did I get it right? If so, leave a comment telling me, and if you feel I missed something, tell me that too. I always appreciate hearing from y'all and hearing your perspectives. Either way, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, as that tells me reviews are something you want to see more of. And I'll see you on the next one. But you in the script actually have goodbye here, but I'm actually going to talk about one other thing I forgot to put in. At this point, I'm going to call out the Smash team here. If you guys, after everything Echoes of Wisdom has done to help you out with designing a moveset for Zelda in Smash, if you still stick her with Ocarina of Time powers at that point, that's just on you guys for being incompetent. Like, this is the moveset potential in Smash, from Echoes of Wisdom is massive. And I think would be very worth exploring if you are interested in reworking characters. Because, to be fair, maybe at some point I might do in 2025, I might actually do a tier list for Smash where I just rank the characters that need moveset reworks. But for now, seriously guys, Smash team, you better implement some of this, because she needs a rework. And as awesome as Phantom is, like, keep Phantom. Phantom's great. But seriously, please give us, put something from Echoes of Wisdom in. Please. Anyway, goodbye.